jaw changes here. Hearing on land, so with hearing in the water is compressible, and so you make a noise, and it actually pushes the water, which has pressure. And remember, we can get some information from the lateral line system of the fish, also from the air bladder and things like that. When you're out on land, the sounds, they're going to be airborne. So you have to have some sort of a structure for transferring the airwaves into some sort of mechanical message. And so these are bones. So we have have a little plate, and then bones that can connect to the cochlea, which is connected also to the vestibular apparatus. So basically, here's our vestibular apparatus, and here's the cochlea. And the cochlea has all those hair cells that are involved in hearing. So there's a membrane that circles around here that has these hair cells that get compressed when this little tympanum here vibrates. So it's like a bass drum. It vibrates and sends a message. It bends these hair cells, and the message goes to your brain. If you know a certain frequency, and it's just occurred. But we had to do this. We had to make this shift because airwaves are so different than the waves in water. And so translating this flat membrane into these hair cells bending requires some bones. And I'll talk a lot about these when we get to mammals, because the mammals have all three. But in the fish, we're just going to be in the amphibians, we're just have one. But I'll spend some more time on it.
So you said in amphibians it's just one solid bone?
Yeah, well, they only have one of these.
Okay.
So it's called the columella, and it's actually the highway bone that forms it. But they don't have all three, and that has to do with losing a couple of the other bones in the jaw that become part of this. Excuse me? Which one? I'm going to do it. Don't worry about it right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to be giving you a lot more. All you need to know right now is that the hearing on land is different than the hearing on water. Kidneys. So now we've got issues with drying out. Well, you had issues with drying out in marine environments. So the kidney's already kind of ready to go. The kidney is involved in water retention in teleosts that are in marine teleosts. But the gills are no longer there, right? We can't use gills anymore. Well, the gills were really important in getting rid of the salt, right, from the ocean. So we could drink water and get rid of the salts through the gills primarily. So the kidneys take over that function. And the kidneys become much more important in ion exchange than they were with fish. And so we start with again, in the fish, we had some that used pronephros. It's not functional in the amphibians. We're going to at least the mesonephros and the metanephros. The other thing that's going to happen is that we may put a bladder on, because retaining that water somewhere is real important too. The skin, we're going to lose scales, at least initially. The amphibians don't have scales. Reptiles will later. We lose it, but we still retain the impermeability of the skin. So the amphibian skin has lipids and things like that are in the outer layer that slow down water excretion. And then the other thing they do is they have glands. They have a number of glands in this skin in the dermis. But some of them have mucus in them that actually coat the surface of the skin and help also with water, basically preventing the skin from drying out. They also have some other glands, and these we're going to see are becoming important in a lot of the tetrapods. Some of them have poison that they can put in the skin on the outer surface to prevent predators from eating them. And they're also going to produce chemicals that are involved in communication. And I'll talk a lot about that when we get to some of the sap. As I said, scales come later, and they're more when we start to get rid of the wet skin. But basically, the non-amniotic skin is moist and yet relatively impermeable and holds water. Okay, so that was just some big generalities. I'm going to be kind of showing you how some of these things work as we go into different groups. There are 3 groups of amphibians that I'm talking about, and if we look at if you look back at that cladogram, this is just kind of pictures of the same thing. It had a bunch of fossil things, and then it had 2 groups that came out. It had the reptiles, the reptiliomorpha, and then a group called the Batrachomorpha. And the Batrachomorpha included fossil amphibians, like the lepidospondyls and the labyrinthodonts. But it was kind of a question as to where the amphibians come off. We talk about a group coming off called the Lys amphibians, and it is monophyletic. It's a group that includes the frogs and toads, the anurans, the salamanders, the urodils, and the caecilians, the opponents. So what I'm going to do now is spend a lot of time on these 3, probably a couple of lectures. All right, so, yes.
What was that last one?
Apoda. Those are caecilians. I'll show you a picture of them in just a second. The opodons are these, they're worm-like amphibians that occur in the tropics. All right, in terms of the Batrachomorpha that was present during the Devonian, we have the lepidospondyls and labyrinthodonts. These are, you would kind of, they look like sarcopterygians that came out of water. Here's a sarcopterygian, kind of like a coelacanth that comes out of the water. But we begin to see some more walking ability, more breathing ability, things like this. And this kind of just represents, as I mentioned, that the Devonian tended to be a period of dry periods and wet periods, and so you have these pools that dry out. So the 3 extant orders, anurans, urodela, and opponents, are in the Batrachomorpha right here. And see, the reptiliomorpha will be all the rest of them. The Batrachomorpha comes up right here, and it includes some fossil stuff, but the Lys amphibia, which includes those 3, then show up during the time of the dinosaurs, the Triassic. That's when we start getting our first fossils. So you're really not going to have to worry too much about any of these fossils. Your book has a lot, and I think it's chapter 8, talks a lot about those. Kind of skim through them. Go on to the chapter on amphibians, because that's what we're concentrating on.
The Lys amphibia comes before the
So, no, this group They, in your particular one, they're calling it, it's really out of this amphibian. This particular branch. But as you can see, it is modified at all three of those groups. These are orders, okay? So you're gonna need to know these for lab anyway. Codes, the and oppose the order. Yes.
Did you say we don't?
Yeah, don't worry too much about the extinguisher. I'll show you a couple of things on that. Those two names you probably did. And really not much about getting into the name of fossil. But it's kind of a fun chapter, read a little bit about it. I'm not saying ignore it, but I don't expect you to repeat all. Okay, so if we look at cladogram, figure 9.2, it kind of shows where we are. So we had some bony changes in the fins so that the animals could get out and walk on land a little bit. The choanae are the external nostrils. They go down into the mouth so they can breathe, and I'll talk more about that. Eventually, we're going to get hands and feet, and the fin rays will be lost, the very tips of the fins. And that's about where the stem tetrapods come off, some of those labyrinthodonts, things like that. The occipital condyles are the bony connections to your skull. And that has to do again with getting your skull hanging out there in the air. You've got to have some pretty good connections. So the list amphibia come up here, and this other group of amphibians that disappeared come off of that group. From then on, we're going to get into the reptilian groups. So all of that, this group. So just hold off on that. That'll be on the next PowerPoint. Right now, we're going to look at the list amphibia. Okay, so these animals have been coming out on the land, eating out there, doing things out there. But the big thing about amphibians is that they have to have water. Their skin's still moist, and the big thing is their eggs. Their eggs are anamniotic, which basically means the amniotic egg is the terrestrial egg. So if you're amniotic, then it means you've got to go to water to lay your eggs. And you don't necessarily have to go back to the lake or the pond or the ocean, but you got to find some water somewhere. So there's some limits to where these guys can occur. You don't see them in the Sahara Desert. So what happens is that they go back to water, lay their eggs, and the larvae that hatch from the eggs are aquatic. They spend some time there. The anurans, we call them tadpoles, when they live in the water. And they oftentimes eat different stuff than the adult does. Oftentimes they're vegetarian in the frogs. And at some point in time, then they metamorphose and they lose their tail and become an adult frog with the unusual jumping as their means of locomotion. Now, the Urodela have a different kind of larva. It'll have external gills, which the tadpole doesn't. It has internal gills. It has 4 legs to begin with, and it's also carnivorous at the beginning. So the Urodela larvae are meat eaters. They don't change as much then when they metamorphose. They just have to lose the gills, kind of change the way their tail maybe works. So not a huge change in terms of their shape, but some changes internally in terms of breathing air now.
Wait, how many rooms do they have?
Excuse me?
You said how many rooms do they have?
They have 4. So these are gills here. They're carnivores. Yes, as adults too. Now, the endurance are carnivores as adults, but the tadpoles tend to eat vegetation. Not all of them. I'll give you a couple of exceptions, but generally they eat vegetation. So, in terms of this amphibia being different from the stem tetrapods, there's some things that are present. They have skin glands. I showed you the mucus and the poisons. The columella I mentioned. The columella is a single bone that is derived from the hyoid arch. It's involved in hearing. Now, it's in the fish, the hyoid is part of the operculum. And so this bony connection is important in carrying messages from the operculum, becomes part of that tympanic membrane that works like the base drum. They have in their eyes some rods that can detect bluish colors called green rods. So they have some color vision. So these are different, only found in amphibians. We're going to develop rods and cones in reptiles, but these are different. Their teeth are out on pedestals. They kind of set up, so they're pedestal-like teeth. This is a picture of them. The dentine from the jaw kind of goes up, and then so they sit on that. We see other kinds of teeth when we talk about reptiles, but they're more like, well, I'll get to that. They have a muscle under their eye that basically enlarges the mouth and pushes up, and it allows them to kind of pull things in to the mouth when they're swallowing. And then they can push with it, so push it on down. So it has to do with feeding. Although, I don't know if you've ever watched if you've ever kept a pet frog or anything, when they eat, they end up closing their eyes, because the eyes kind of sink down. And that's this muscle contracting. It's kind of interesting to watch. So this is table 10.1, but it has a lot of information on each of these. Those 5 are the synapomorphies for amphibians. Okay, apodons. The apodons are these kind of strange looking amphibians that have rings. They have these, can you see the rings on these? And within those rings are dermal scales. So we generally think of amphibians as not having any scales, but the apodons do have some in these dermal rings. It's a pretty it's not a very well known group. They're about 170 some species in 3 different families. The Colchicida is kind of the common name for them. They're primarily tropical in their distribution. They don't have any limbs, so they kind of live down in wet leaf litter and move. Some of them are aquatic and can still swim, but they don't run or jump like the other amphibians do. They have some little sensory tentacles here that help them find food. tend to, eat things like worms and other invertebrates that live in that leaflet. So, as I said, they have these rings that are called annuli, and in those there are scales. Makes them fairly unusual. Probably the thing that's neatest about them, we really didn't know a whole lot about them. I mean, people had collected them in the tropics, but they're hard to watch because they're down in the leaf and they're doing things. And so we didn't know a lot about their behavior. A little bit about some of the reproductive behavior, because there were some that you would find babies with them. So this is a mother, and these are her babies. And they're born really big. So one of the things about the apodants are some unusual reproductive modes. The mother, in some cases, produces a milk inside the uterus, and the babies feed on it, and they can grow inside of her. So when they're born, they're very large. When the mother feeds the babies internally, that's called matrotrophy. So
That's the milk?
in this case, it's kind of like milk. It's not exactly, but it's a lining of the uterus that they feed on. And matrotrophy just means the mother's taking care of the offspring. That's all that means. But they're also viviparous. So viviparity, as we saw with sharks and guppies and things like that, occurs in these. They have live young. So it's a very case-selective strategy to have really large young ones. There's even one that the babies are born smaller, but they hang around the mother, and she produces like little pustules on her skin, and they eat on her skin, and they grow feeding on her that way. If you want to read more about them, Margaret Wade at Berkeley is probably the world expert on Cecilians, and she's got a webpage with a lot of fun information.
Did you think matrotrophy means they feed them internally, or does it just mean they take care of them?
Any kind of feeding. Trophy means feeding, well, supplying energy, and matro just means mother. So matrotrophic is we generally think of it internally, but if it's in the case of these guys, it might be external production. Now, it's not going out and finding an insect and feeding it to the baby. That's not matrotrophic. It has to be something that the mother gives up. So really, the reason I put these first, we both put some last in the chapter, but I kind of like it first because there's not very many. Just this three families. So you have a table that has the three families and talks about it. I don't expect you to know the families of these guys, but here they are. So these guys live in South America, Africa, India, and the Seychelles Islands. They do not have an aquatic larval stage. And they have some oviparous ones, some that lay eggs, and some that are viviparous. These guys are in the Philippines, Thailand, China, Malaysia. These do have aquatic larvae. And this particular family, the ADIE means family, so these are the families. These are terrestrial, but they have an aquatic larva. What I would like you to kind of look at is the distribution. I got this out of a herpetology book, and just be aware that the Cecilians are tropical. We have a few here in Mexico. Actually, that's very southern part. I guess Yucatan there. Central America and South America, coast of Africa, India here. So primarily tropical. You're not going to find them in any sort of dry areas.
They're primarily tropical or?
They are tropical. Yeah. I think there's one that occurs in Florida. Let's show it. There's one just down in the tip of Florida, one species. But yeah, even there, that's subtropical. So that's about all I have to say about those. Just probably the neatest thing about them is their unusual reproduction. The Urodele I'll spend some more time on because we have several species here in East Texas. In fact, North America is one of the areas where we have lots of diversity. There are 9 families. I'm not going to expect you to know them all, but I am going to give you a few of these, primarily the ones we have in East Texas. Almost 700 species of these. So these are the salamanders. And so this table is one you're going to want to refer to fairly frequently. Some of these are aquatics, some are terrestrial. There's even some that are viviparous and have live young on land. All right, so I'll go through each of the families that I want you to know. So the Sirenidae is a North American family. Only place we see it. There's 4 species, and we have one in East Texas. They have aquatic only. We catch them in minnow traps this time of year, and be moving around with crayfish and worms and things like that. So they have these external gills and kind of small feet. Large mouth for eating things like, say, crayfish and so they look like they're pedomorphic, that is, they've stayed aquatic and just became reproductive in their larval form. So aquatic with external gills. The cryptobranchids are also aquatic salamanders. They're found in kind of a weird distribution. We see this kind of distribution a lot with salamanders. It has to do with the fact that when they separated, some of the continents were still connected. But we find the one cryptobranchid occurs in the Mississippi drainage of the eastern U.S. and then over here in Japan and China. So that little blue distribution here is of the cryptobranchids. These are really huge salamanders. The hellbender, which occurs in Mississippi, lives in the river on the bottom, and they get like 3-4 feet long, huge. Again, eating off the bottom, they have this big wide mouth. Now their gills, well, they don't use gills. They actually absorb a lot of oxygen through the skin. They have this very flappy skin, and they can absorb oxygen through the skin. So they don't have external gills. So they have to have running water with lots of oxygen, and that's where you find them. In the old world, there are 2 species of what are called giant salamanders. There's a Chinese one and a Japanese one, and they get like 1.5 meters in length, so 5 or 6 feet in length, and big enough to take your hand off. Stick it in the ground. So quite large, walking in around on the bottom of the bigger rivers. And so for that reason, they're in some trouble because a lot of big rivers get dammed. And so in the U.S., in some of our bigger rivers, they put in trout and things that eat their babies. So they're both in some trouble in terms of conservation. Just really unique looking animals. Several of the zoos in the U.S. have some of the giant Japanese salamanders. If you ever get, the Cincinnati Zoo, for example, has a large group of them. Well, we don't have that one here, but we do have this one. These are Amphiuma and the Amphiumidae, that family. They are just big eel-looking like things. Sometimes they're even called buffalo eels. Big, long salamanders. They have really small little legs, all four legs, but they're teeny, not very useful. They swim with the body more than they do with the feet. They differ from the sirens in that they have their gills. They have gills, but they're internal. I'm sure they absorb some oxygen through the skin, but they do get oxygen through the gills. These occur in U.S. only. The distribution for the Amphiumidae or this blue area right here. We have 3 species, and they're all in the southeastern U.S. Not very common right here. I've only gotten a couple over, but if you get into Louisiana, they're pretty abundant over there. See if I can see this guy. The next family will be the Plethodonids. Plethodonidae are interesting in that they are lungless. They're terrestrial. Well, they're both aquatic and terrestrial, but they're really small little salamanders, and so they have a lot of surface area, and they can absorb enough oxygen through their skin that they don't need lungs. So they mostly occur in the Appalachian region of the U.S. There's, I think I had in that one map before, the red is where the Plethodonids occur. So very diverse in the eastern U.S., not so many in California, but they do occur down in the Central and South America. They're really the only salamander that does. Not very many species. There's primarily one genus. So, as opposed to the opponents, salamanders don't get into the tropics very much. They're more of a temperate zone animal. But these guys do send a few individuals down there. They like cold environments because that's where there's more oxygen. And cold water, hot water loses its oxygen. So you find these in cold water streams. We have one species that occurs in East Texas, and they're only found below springs. So if you have a spring on your property and you look for in the leaf litter downstream of the spring, you'll find these guys. But they're disappearing because we're building on top of our spring, and we've lost a lot. I haven't seen any in a long time. But they're pretty diverse in the southeastern U.S., over 400 species. Like I said, some in the very northwestern U.S. and a few in the central America. So they tend to be these little short-legged, long-tailed salamanders. And if you go into the Appalachian area and flip rocks and look, you'll find lots of species, and they coexist. They kind of separate out their niches and so on. Oh, here's that distribution again. And most of them in the New World. One of the other things that's interesting about the Plethodonids is, and other salamanders use pheromones for communication, but they've been studying a lot in these guys because you can find them in concentrated areas So you can study their behavior. And so Bob Yeager, the biologist down at University of Louisiana, and he studied communication in salamanders in the Appalachian region. And what you could lift a rock up and you'd find a single male of a given species there. They were very territorial. They didn't have big territory, but they would have little ones. So they were studying a lot of that. Alicia Mathis, Bob's retired now, but Alicia Mathis, she's got to take it the work again. So she was where but the idea was that males were territorial. They would set up these areas where they would fight each other. And so you'd see them with scars on them and so on. And they communicated with pheromones that are released in these hedonic glands out in the skin. And they smell, well, the males will go around and deposit odor in their territory. Other males would come along and they have these little grooves in their nose, and they would stick their nose on the pheromone, and it would chemicals would come up in that groove in their nose, and they could smell that there was a male there, and they would, if it was a dominant male, it would leave. So they communicated that way. It was pretty neat, and a lot of work. The little grooves are called nasolabial grooves, and they occur only in the plethodontids. So if you see this little groove between the nose and the bottom lip, the bottom part of the upper lip, then you know you've got the plethodontid. Salamanders have been studied in terms of the use of chemicals a lot, not just the plethodontids, but others, because they also use them in courtship. What happens is that there's some really neat things. The males will produce pheromones that attract the females and get them in the right position for mating. Salamanders, some of the more primitive ones have external fertilization, but a lot of them have internal fertilization. But they don't have a copulatory organ. The males don't have a penis. So how do they get the eggs inside? The sperm inside the female. Well, what they do is they get the female to follow the male, and then the male will put deposit a little structure in the water with a sperm packet on top. It's called a spermatophore. And the female who's following the male will follow right over that sperm packet, and she has little lips on her cloaca that snap off the cap, and she gets the sperm inside her. So it's real important that the male gets the female oriented, and so people are studying kind of the different ways in which they get the female into position to take up that spermatophore. So these are some nudes where a male is attracting the female by waving his tail. A lot of times it's pheromones. The females their face will rub on the back of the male to get in the right position and things like that. So you can take a look at this figure and read a little bit about it. It's been studied quite a bit. The other thing I want to mention with salamanders is locomotion. I kind of drew this the other day, but I want to make sure it made sense. So when we get out on land, we've got to get the body up, and that's why the bones in the feet get longer and stronger. But the locomotion still involves undulation. So with the fish, they were undulating to push forces against the water, but we don't have much to push against when we're talking about air. So what happens instead is that the lifting of the feet is what's critical here. So if you take this foot here, lift it up, move it forward, and plant it right there, and this foot stays in position, lift this one, move it forward, and the same thing here, you lift this foot, move it forward, that one stays in position. What's happening? The animals move forward. And the way they do that is by just wiggling the body. They don't have the feet underneath them. So when we catch some salamanders, which I hope we do in a couple of weeks, we'll bring them in the lab and you can watch them walk. And they do a lot of this wiggling. So the lateral undulations is still critical to a locomotion. Does that make sense? How they do that? The Protiidae is a small group of salamanders that are primarily New World. They're totally aquatic. There's one in the Old World, one species. But most of them are in the U.S. There's not very many of them, but we have one here in East Texas. It's called the Gulf Coast water duck. You may be more familiar with mud puppies if you've done any a lot of anatomy labs. They dissect mud puppies because they're pretty common up north and they can get lots of them. So this is a mud puppy, and they've got external gills, walk on the bottom, kind of like the cryptobranchids. But remember, the cryptobranchids have internal gills. These guys have a big wide head and eat crayfish and things off the bottom. Other than the fact that we have them here, not a whole lot about them, other than a couple species have become adapted to living in caves. And so we have these cave salamanders in this family in several places in the U.S. And they are blind and they're white because they don't need to have pigments in the skin.
Only these kinds are,
Excuse me?
only that kind of disease?
Yeah, the cave salamanders, all ones that occur in the U.S. or this family.
Okay. So there's some that occur outside the U.S. or in
Oh, there's one member that's on the world. Yeah. Europe, that region.
Okay.
I tell you what, I think I'll stop there. It's about time. So, okay, and I'll finish up the salamanders. We'll start on the front.